Have you ever wondered why a mere glance from her can echo long after she turns away? In the hush of a crowded room, she moves like a hidden current, unseen, yet undeniably felt. He sees her, or believes he does, but what enthralls him is not her visible form, but the 9 silent layers of power she weaves into her presence, each one a subtle strike against his conscious understanding. In this first dusk of their encounter, she stands at the threshold of her own becoming, and he is drawn to that edge like a moth to flame. At the first layer, she carries the gravity of self-possession. She has looked into her own eyes, acknowledged the scars etched by betrayals, and allowed them to become symbols of resilience rather than wounds. This shadow work, fierce and unrelenting, has taught her that pain is not a prison, but a teacher. Each day she returns to that inner chamber, sits with the echoes of her past, and listens until forgiveness replaces bitterness. And in that transformation, she radiates a silent command: know your own power before seeking it from any outside source. He senses it, though he cannot name it, and it unsettles his need to possess. Beneath that, the second layer pulses with attuned detachment. She engages the world without expectation, offering kindness as an unburdened gift rather than a currency for attention. This detachment is not coldness, it is sovereignty. It whispers to him that he will not find her tethered to his approval, and this revelation ignites a deep shadowy intrigue. For a man raised on the mirage of conquest, this refusal to be conquered dissolves his usual triumphant script. She moves through her emotions with the steadiness of Stoic silence, like the river that does not cling to the stones it passes. In her third layer, she embodies the lesson of Epictetus. External events are beyond our control. Our judgments alone shape our suffering. He watches as she greets disappointment with a calm reassessment rather than a storm of reaction, and he marvels that what he once saw as vulnerability becomes instead unshakable poise. That poise consumes him. He wonders what it would take to rattle her, and he finds no answer. In the fourth stratum of her being, she has learned ego projection's secret. What unsettles others often reflects their own unhealed shadows. When he feels the pull of jealousy or the sting of inadequacy, she remains impassive, as if performing in a play whose script she does not recognize. This refusal to mirror his projection forces him inward, confronting the hidden fears she refuses to indulge. He chafes against the mirror she holds up to him, but he is compelled to look deeper. The fifth layer is the fertile ground of her anima, her intuitive, unconscious wisdom. She moves with a subtle synchronicity, aligning choices with the currents of her inner landscape. Without understanding why, he begins to anticipate her thoughts, to sense her needs before they rise to the surface. This uncanny attunement unsettles him further. He thought he understood her, but in truth she navigates realms he has yet to chart. Layer 6 is the art of archetypal storytelling. She embodies the wounded healer, the sovereign queen, the free spirit, all at once cycling through these forms with deliberate fluidity. He perceives her as a shifting constellation, never fully static, always becoming. Each new guise invites his curiosity, dissolving the comfort of familiarity and replacing it with a craving for discovery that he cannot satiate. Beneath these, the seventh layer hums with boundary mastery. She knows where she ends and the world begins, where his desires end and her autonomy begins. In encounters with him, she holds her center with unwavering clarity. This skill of delineation astonishes a man accustomed to blurred lines. Her refusal to merge her identity with his awakens in him a need to respect space he never knew was sacred. The eighth layer is the alchemy of inner faith. She trusts her trajectory even when the path disappears ahead. She listens to the still, small voice beneath the roar of doubt and moves accordingly. This quiet conviction, born of repeated acts of courage, casts a gravitational field around her choices, drawing him forward into the mystery of her journey. And finally, there is a ninth, almost invisible layer, the echo of her unspoken dreams shimmering just beyond his reach. It is the promise of an inner world he cannot fully penetrate, a realm where her aspirations and yearnings dwell safe from him, and yet inviting him to witness. This layer consumes him most of all. He craves entrance into that sacred space, even as she remains sovereign gatekeeper of her own soul. In these first moments, he discovers that power need not shout to be heard. A woman who has excavated her depths can command attention simply by existing. As she walks away, the imprint of her silent strength remains a challenge and an invitation both. He is left to ponder what it means to pursue someone who pursues herself above all else. The pull of her silent power doesn't release him. When the lights dim or the music fades, it follows him home like a phantom imprint on his pulse. He tries to analyze the sensation to wield reason like a lantern in the dark corridors she's opened within him, but each question dissolves into another. She has, without uttering a single command, become the axis around which his thoughts rotate, and in that rotation he confronts fragments of himself he once kept hidden. He notices how he begins to measure his own worth in echoes of her detached gaze. When she offered the smallest flicker of genuine curiosity, tilted, had subtle incline in her voice. It felt like sunlight through storm clouds, and when she withheld it, he was left in the grey hush of longing stripped of illusions that he could earn her attention through tactics he once believed foolproof. His habitual strategies, flattery pursuit formulas, crack against the fortress of her self-possession. It dawns on him that he has traded authenticity for performance, and she demands no masks. This revelation pains him, but it also seduces him into confronting the egoic scripts he has carried for years. Night after night, he turns this over in his mind, the incisive truth that when a woman stands aligned with her own depth, she relieves no one else of the burden of their own shadow. He recalls the words of Marcus Aurelius Waste, "No more time arguing what a good man should be. Be one." He feels that the transformation she embodies is not a passive trait, it is an active crucible that invites others to become themselves or collapse before it. And he resists collapse. He senses an opportunity in this silent challenge to reckon with his own unending noise of need. His dreams become populated with her silhouette, moving beyond doorways he cannot open. In his sleep, he hears a voice that is neither hers nor entirely his, whispering fragments of Seneca's counsel on self-sufficiency. At dawn, in the quiet that follows pain, he jots down words in a battered journal he had abandoned, seeking to map the territory of his unowned fears. This journal becomes a kind of secret oracle revealing his patterns of chasing approval and his habit of collapsing at the first sign of rejection. Slowly, unconsciously, he begins his own version of shadow work. He tracks moments when he flares with jealousy, when he pictures her attention drifting to another man, and examines the root, a childhood narrative that taught him that love must be earned, that worth is conditional. He sits with that ache until it softens into insight. It is the same practice she has honed, but she proceeded first, carved a path through her own underbrush, so that he might one day learn to walk it. He realizes that she never needed to teach him. She only needed to become herself fully, and he followed the echo of her integrity. In social encounters, he observes her embodiment of feminine power. She listens, first speaks with intention, and retreats when she has said enough. He notices how men cluster around her stories, drawn by her quiet authority, yet leave wanting more because she always holds something back. It is as if she refuses to exhaust her mystery, preserving an inner sanctum that no one can violate. He admires this self-imposed boundary, recognizing that he has spent his life pilfering intimacy until it lost its meaning. Now he watches her give presence rather than words, feeling an ache for a communion he cannot seize but might yet earn through patience and respect. As his fascination grows, he feels tenderness for his own journey. He uncovers parts of himself that had withered from neglect, his capacity for stillness, his latent compassion beneath a brittle armor of cynicism. the spark of creative longing he once chased in vain from one distraction to the next. She has become a mirror, not to feed his vanity, but to reflect his possibilities, and he begins to understand that her silent power consumes his mind only to set him free from his own self-imposed chains. Yet even as he awakens to this inward revolution, a tension remains. He feels torn between the pull to possess her and the wisdom that possession would destroy the very qualities he admires. Here, he finds himself at the threshold of individuation, the path Jung described, where one must relinquish projections to claim oneself. In this liminal space, he senses the last layer of her influence, the invitation to sovereignty, to become the architect of his own psyche rather than a pilgrim in hers. He practices restraint, curious to see if he can hold both desire and reverence without tipping into obsession. He drafts silent letters he never sends, pouring his insights into lines that release their charge when penned. He stands before the mirror and practices saying her name with respect instead of entitlement. He writes new scripts for his heart's scripts of mutual recognition rather than conquest. And through it all, he hears the rhythmic echo of her unspoken refrain, "I choose myself first." It resonates in the cadence of his own awakening. He understands now that the power she wields is not a cloak she drapes over others, it is the living tapestry of her self-knowing. To approach it is not to claim it, but to honor it, and through that honoring, to learn the sacred art of honoring himself. He finds himself returning to memories of their encounter as though they were sacred texts, each detail a verse that reveals more upon every reading. In those recollections, he senses the echo of her silent power reverberating against his own walls of doubt. The early thrill of pursuit, once a chase of conquests, has softened into a pilgrimage toward inner truth. He is surprised to realize that the most intoxicating moments are not when she looked at him, but when she looked past him, as if acknowledging something greater than either of them. In that gaze, he glimpsed the promise of a bond that transcends possession. In his solitude, he rehearses dialogues that never transpired, speaking not to her lips, but to the unspoken chambers of her psyche. "What do you see when you look into my eyes?" he asks the empty room, and in that silence, he hears the first stirrings of a question he never asked himself. What do I see when I look at me? It is the question that has no easy answer for it, demands that he excavate the foundations of his identity and reframe the beliefs he has carried like an heirloom. She remains a catalyst for his transformation, yet she never steps aside to applaud his progress. This refusal to validate his growth becomes its own lesson in autonomy. He notes how her power is not diminished by his strides towards self-awareness. Rather, it is reflected back to him, magnified by his courage to explore the terrain she first charted. In this unfolding, he begins to celebrate her absence as much as her presence, recognizing that yearning can be a teacher as potent as proximity. Late one evening, he uncovers an old journal where he once scrawled lines of desperate longing under a flickering street lamp. The entries read like confessions of a man who believed love was a transaction, an exchange of emotion for validation. He shudders at the version of himself who thought that stringing words of devotion together with carefully measured cadence could secure someone else's devotion. Now, against the backdrop of her silent mastery, his past voices sound hollow. He tears out the pages and watches them curl in the trash, a ritual of release that echoes her own practice of letting go. In turning inward, he discovers a latent capacity for serenity. His breath becomes a bridge between the cacophony of his thoughts and the still point she inhabits naturally. He begins each day with a moment of witness, observing the rising tide of desires, without clinging, offering himself the same grace she bestowed upon her own shadows. In this practice, he feels the dawn of inner sovereignty, a quiet kinship with her first layer of self-possession. He tests the boundaries of his reborn self in interactions with others. He listens without the urge to respond, speaks without the need to persuade, and feels emotions without the compulsion to perform. These moments of measured authenticity attract people toward him in unexpectedly genuine ways, mirroring the magnetism that once drew him to her. He experiences the subtle joy of being seen for who he truly is, not for who he pretended to be. Yet he remains haunted by the ninth layer. She carried the whisper of her unspoken dreams. He wonders what worlds dwell behind those quiet depths, what passions she cherishes in secret, what visions she follows in darkness. The mystery of her interior life calls to him not as a conquest, but as an invitation to vulnerability. He begins sketching his own dreams on the corners of his notebook. Ambitions he had shelved in the fear of failure, passions he feared he lacked the talent to pursue. In giving voice to these dreams, he honors the power she wielded by safeguarding her own. In this evolving dance, he discerns a new layer emerging within himself, a capacity for reverent curiosity. Where once he sought to master or manipulate, he now seeks to understand and marvel. He sits across from a friend, grappling with pain, and finds himself offering silence instead of advice, presence instead of solutions. He feels the resonance of Jung's words on individuation, that true connection springs from whole individuals meeting as equals, each bearing their own light and shadow. Occasionally doubts flicker. Is his transformation sincere or merely another guise to win her favor? These questions revisit him like unwelcome guests, but he greets them with the detachment she modeled, examining their motives, observing their shadows. Through this, he learns that authenticity is not a static achievement, but a continual practice of self-inquiry. He remembers that she did not arrive at completion. She moves in perpetual becoming, and he must remain committed to the journey. In moments of stillness, he senses her presence not as an object of desire, but as a guiding hum in his own soul's resonance. He no longer wonders how to capture her attention. Instead, he cultivates the attention he gives to himself and the world around him. He sees in every sunrise the quiet grandeur she carries, in every storm the resilience she embodies. Her quiet power has seeded a revolution in him, the realization that the most profound conquest is the conquest of the self. His longing transforms into respect, his craving into curiosity, his pursuit into pilgrimage, and though their paths may diverge, he carries her influence as a torch, illuminating the shadows of his own psyche. She remains the sovereign author of her inner worlds, and he, at last, becomes the author of his. In that mutual sovereignty, he finds freedom. Neither could bestow upon the other, but both can choose to honor. He senses, too, the subtle echo of her sovereign faith in each breath he takes, an unspoken reminder that life unfolds in moments of radical trust. It was layer 8. She carried an unshakable conviction in her own inner compass, and now he feels that compass awakening within him. Amid the small crises of his daily life, the unfinished report, the awkward silence at a party, the ache of past regrets, he discovers a soft voice insisting, "You are enough." In that insistence, he finds the courage to lean into discomfort rather than flee it. In meetings, he pauses before speaking, allowing the weight of his words to align with his true intentions. He recalls her deliberate cadence, the way she let silence swell until it demanded to be heard. He practices the same learning that absence of noise can be as compelling as its presence. And in these moments, colleagues lean in not because he commands them, but because he invites their genuine attention. At home, he tends to small rituals, lighting a candle and sitting in its glow, eyes closed, feeling its fragile flame steady against the darkness. This ceremony honors the 9th layer. She first revealed the realm of unspoken hopes, sacred and inviolate. He writes affirmations on slips of paper and tucks them into a velvet pouch, a tangible reminder that dreams are not idle fantasies, but living seeds awaiting water. In watering them, he honors her gift of preserving mystery. He acknowledges that some treasures are wrapped in silence. He remembers a phrase from Jung, "Who looks outside dreams, who looks inside awakes." He sees now that her silent power was never a weapon against him, but a beacon guiding him toward his own awakening. And so he learns to turn inward, exploring the labyrinth of his psyche with both reverence and resolve. He befriends the parts of himself he once feared, the loner, who finds solace in midnight walks, the poet who stumbles over rhyme, the skeptic who questions every certainty. Each of these voices adds color to his inner tapestry, and he weaves them together in a newfound wholeness. In his friendships, he offers the gift of presence. No longer does he fill the air with anecdotes to secure laughter. He sits alongside friends in their struggles, letting shared vulnerability deepen their bonds. He watches as eyes soften in response, as unguarded smiles emerge. He realizes that connection like her power thrives in authenticity rather than artifice. Yet even as he integrates these lessons, he feels the lingering pull of his old self, the man who sought validation like a drug, who equated attention with worth. When that self resurfaces, he greets it not with judgment, but compassion, as she taught by her own example. He names the fear beneath the old habit, fear of insignificance, of being unseen, and lets it speak until its tremors soften. He does not discard that part of him. He transfigures it through acknowledgement. In the quiet dawn, he sometimes revisits the memory of her silhouette against the dim glow of a street lamp. He recalls the precise moment their eyes met, and how her gaze held both invitation and boundary. In that duality, he found his own longing for both intimacy and autonomy. He treasures that memory, not as a keepsake to revisit in nostalgia, but as a compass point, reminding him that love flourishes between equals, two sovereign souls who choose each other without losing themselves. As days pass, he notices that the ache of desire has transformed into a tender respect. He no longer obsesses over her absence, but celebrates the space it allows him to grow. He writes letters to himself, acknowledging milestones, the first time he resisted the urge to call her the moment he completed a creative project. He had delayed the evening he sat quietly while his friend wept, offering silent support. Each note is a testament to his own capacity for growth, a mirror of the path she blazed. He begins to see life as layered, not just the 9 she revealed, but an unfolding continuum of discovery. Every encounter, every mirror, every pulse of emotion offers a new plane to explore. He does not know where this journey will end, if it ever does, but he welcomes the uncertainty. For in uncertainty, he finds possibility. The possibility of becoming more fully himself, of loving more deeply, of living more courageously. And through it all, he carries her silent power as a quiet anthem in his heart. It is not a trophy he possesses, but a song he learned to sing. It harmonizes with his own inner voice, creating a melody neither could produce alone. In that harmony, he glimpses the true meaning of connection. Two sovereign beings, each whole on their own, resonating in shared authenticity. The world around him still spins with chaos and beauty, pain and triumph. But now, when he steps into that swirl, he does so, anchored by the lessons she embodied: self-possession, detachment, poise, shadow, reckoning, intuitive, alchemy, archetypal embodiment, boundary, mastery, inner faith, and the mystery of dreams. Each of these layers, once hers alone, now lives within him, shaping his presence with the same gravity that once consumed his mind. He no longer chases her power, he embodies his own. And in embodying it, he discovers that the most profound magnetism arises when two whole souls meet, not as hunter and prey, but as companions on a shared pilgrimage toward wholeness. He notices how the world seems to shift when he moves through it with the clarity she inspired. The market's bustle, once a dissonant noise, becomes a symphony of intention when he listens with presence. Every exchange, his nod to the barista, the way he holds eye contact with a stranger, carries weight, for he has learned that small acts of mindful connection ripple outward. This is the fruit of Layer 6's archetypal embodiment, to become the storyteller of one's own life, speaking with authenticity that invites others to remember their own stories. In a quiet moment at dawn, he reflects on the paradox of attraction she unveiled. True magnetism requires surrender to one's own sovereignty. He recalls the moment she smiled without seeking his approval, and how that light born from self-knowing became more irresistible than any practiced allure. He practices smiling at his reflection, not to test if he's pleasing, but to honor the self that greets him each morning. He senses in that mirror a woman who once lived in the same body. He now inhabits a testament to the transformative power of inner work. He witnesses how his relationships evolve. Where once he clung to closeness with anxious grip, he now holds space for others' autonomy. When a friend departs for a new city, he responds with genuine blessing rather than desperate pleas for company. When a lover hesitates before sharing a fear, he offers silence instead of advice, trusting that presence is the most potent gift. In these exchanges, he observes echoes of Layer 7, the mastery of boundaries that liberates both giver and receiver. In his creative endeavors, he channels Layer 5's anima wisdom. Ideas flow like currents from some unseen reservoir guided by intuition rather than formula. He writes prose that tingles with vulnerability, paints strokes that dance between chaos and form, composes melodies that echo his heart's lingering questions. He no longer chases external validation for his art. Instead, he honors the impulse that births it, knowing that authenticity will carve its own path in the world. As he works, he hears Marcus Aurelius whisper, "The impediment to action advances action. What stands in the way becomes the way." In each obstacle, he discovers fertile ground for growth. In the marketplace of ideas and ambitions, he embraces Layer 8's inner faith. When rejection arrives, a grant denied, a critique offered, he receives it as data, not verdict. He reminds himself that failure is not an endpoint, but a signpost redirecting him toward new depths. He recalls her unwavering trust in her own trajectory and feels the same steady conviction settling into his bones. In practicing faith, he weaves resilience into the fabric of his days. At night, when the world quiets and shadows lengthen, he tends to Layer 9 by revisiting his secret hopes. He writes letters addressed to future selves, self who has published a book, self who has forgiven past betrayals, self who stands unafraid at the edge of the unknown. These letters are sealed and placed in a wooden box, each one a sacred promise he makes to himself. It is in safeguarding these unspoken dreams that he honors the mystery she first revealed, understanding that some power thrives in silence, nourished by reverent anticipation. He begins mentoring a younger colleague, guiding her through the thicket of self-doubt with empathy reminiscent of his own journey. He impersonates neither teacher nor healer. Instead, he offers the map he traced, inviting her to chart her own course. In her gratitude and emerging confidence, he tastes the joy of shared sovereignty, two minds resonating each whole yet enriched by the other's light. In moments of solitude, he senses the echo of her presence as a gentle hum in his bloodstream. It is neither longing nor regret, but an enduring reminder of the alchemy that ignites when one sovereign soul encounters another. He no longer chases her power across time or memory. Instead, he carries it within him, a living testament to the invitation she extended without a word. He contemplates the journey thus far and marvels that it began with a single hook, a question whispered in that crowded room. From that spark grew an inward odyssey, a reclamation of self sparked by the mirror she held up. He sees now that the 9 layers she revealed were not mere traits to admire from afar, but invitations to cultivate in himself. Each layer, once a silhouette on her terrain, now solidifies in his own landscape, forming a foundation of self-possessed magnetism. He senses that the path ahead will continue unfolding layer upon layer beyond the 9 she first unveiled. Their resonance will persist, an unending waltz of shadow and light, challenge and grace. And he understands that true power is not a destination, but a perpetual dance, an embrace of one's depths that invites the world to join in turn. He stands at this new threshold, heart and mind aligned, ready to step into the next layer of becoming. In that poised readiness, he feels the final lesson she imparts. The woman who knows her worth doesn't chase, she chooses. He senses an undercurrent stirring beneath the veneer of his everyday existence, a subtle tension that hints at layers still waiting to be claimed. In the hum of routine, he feels the quiet ache of potential unfulfilled, as though a symphony within him yet waits for its full orchestration. He recalls how she moved through the world with the confidence of one who knows that creation is not only in grand gestures but in the careful tending of small moments. And he begins to see his own life as a canvas, each choice a brushstroke toward a masterpiece he alone can conceive. He awakens one morning to a familiar restlessness, the impulse to abandon his plans for the safer allure of distraction. But this time, as the thought arises, he greets it as an old adversary. "Is that you again?" he muses, and then he carries on with his intended work, drafting a proposal, cultivating a relationship, nurturing a seed of inspiration. In doing so, he enacts Layer 1's decree that self-possession is proven not in grand victories, but in the small acts of saying no to what diminishes and yes to what empowers. In the reflection of his study window, he sees a man whose gaze no longer searches for external affirmation. It steadies on the horizon of his own becoming. And he wonders, do you feel that hum within you? The subtle vibration of untapped power waiting for your permission to grow. He invites it forward, embracing the uncertainty it carries, leaning into the unknown with the same fearless curiosity she once embodied. When he hears praise, he accepts it with simple gratitude rather than the desperate clutch of a man who once tethered his worth to others' applause. He remembers how she let accolades wash over her without staking her identity upon them. In mirroring this grace, he feels lighter, as if chains of expectation have slipped away. He stands taller, not to garner more attention, but because he no longer needs the crutch of admiration to hold himself aloft. In conversations, he experiments with Layer 2's detachment. He listens, deeply aware of the space between words and emotions, yet remains unentangled by the urgency to respond. He practices letting silence linger until it becomes a bridge rather than an awkward void. And he observes how this silence invites vulnerability in others, as though they sense that he holds nothing to prove and everything to share. In the mirror of his mind, he confronts the ghost of ego projection. When he reacts with irritation or defensiveness, he pauses to trace the origin of the emotion. Is it hers, or is it the echo of his own unreconciled shadow? He breathes into the discomfort, honoring the parts of himself he once denied. This practice, born of Layer 4, refines his presence until it shines with authenticity, unblemished by the distortions of blame. He cultivates the intuitive currents of Layer 5 by returning to the spaces where logic falters, long walks on misty paths, moments of quiet before dawn pauses in the middle of a song that stir the heart without words. In these liminal zones, ideas surface that transcend his daily preoccupations, a new chapter for his life's narrative, a fresh approach to old conflicts, a gesture of kindness towards someone overlooked. He learns that intuition is not an abstract gift, but a compass refined through practice and trust. In his evolving sense of self, he experiments with Layer 6's archetypal embodiment. He leans into the wounded healer, within acknowledging his own wounds not as liabilities but as portals to empathy. He lets the sovereign pulse through him when he claims space in a room without apology. He summons the free spirit when he allows spontaneous joy to guide his actions. These archetypal energies ripple outward, imprinting those around him with an invitation to integration rather than fragmentation. He tightens the stewardship of boundaries in Layer 7. He practices saying no when obligations encroach upon his priorities, and he listens when intuition whispers that a relationship needs recalibration. He notices that some doors he once kept open now lead only to confusion, and he closes them gently with neither rancor nor regret. In doing so, he redeems hours and energy for pursuits that align with his deepest values. He carries Layer 8's inner faith into each venture. When he walks into an unfamiliar room, a networking event, a public speaking engagement, he carries with him the quiet certainty that he belongs. This confidence is not born of arrogance, but of a lived assurance in his own capacity to adapt and contribute. And when challenges arise, he recalls how she trusted her inner compass amid chaos, and he allows the same trust to anchor him. Late at night, he tends to his dreams as if they were living creatures. He journals the fragments that linger upon waking, the ripple of an image, the echo of a phrase, the taste of possibility in his mouth. He treats these nocturnal whispers as seeds, planting them in the fertile ground of intention by sketching plans, setting small goals, and nurturing them with daily action. This ritual honors the 9th layer's sanctity, that some treasures bloom only in the hush of solitude. In these deliberate practices, he feels the fullness of his own silent power emerge. It is not a borrowed aura drawn from her example, but a unique constellation born of his inner alchemy. He recognizes that attraction, true magnetic attraction, arises when you inhabit your own depths with unwavering authenticity. You become both muse and artist of your life's canvas, and in that creative sovereignty, you command attention, not by seeking it, but by embodying the invitation to witness your unfolding. He smiles, not with the hope of catching her eye, but with the quiet joy of one who has discovered a world within himself more vast than any pursuit. And as he stands at the cusp of this new horizon, he feels each of the 9 layers resonate in harmonious tension, gravity and levity, power and softness, knowing and unknowing. In this dance, he glimpses the final truth she offered without words, that the most consuming power is not the one that binds others to you, but the one that frees you to stand unshaken in the radiant field of your own becoming. He carries this quiet revolution into the rhythms of his body, each step, each breath attuned to the subtle melody of self-ownership. In morning stretches, he feels the lean strength in his limbs, recognizing that physical presence can echo the sovereignty he cultivates within. He notices how his shoulders relax when he stops anticipating judgment, how his spine straightens when he claims space as a birthright rather than a borrowed favor. This somatic alignment becomes another instrument through which his silent power sings. In conversation with a stranger at a cafe, he practices Layer 2's attuned detachment. He offers warmth without attachment, curiosity without expectation. When the stranger confides a fear, he listens with the fullness of his evolved empathy, allowing her words to fall into his open presence, rather than using them as mirrors for his own anxieties. In that moment, he feels a resonance he once sought only from her, a connection born of unguarded authenticity, not of strategic exchange. As autumn leaves begin to drift, he takes a solitary walk through their swirling patterns, letting each fallen leaf remind him of old habits left behind. He recalls the ache of past friendships, fractured by envy, the sting of romances weighed down by neediness, the loneliness that flourished in the absence of self-trust. In the rustle of the foliage, he hears an invocation to complete the alchemy begun by her 9 layers, to transmute every lingering speck of insecurity into the gold of self-compassion. He pauses at a sunlit bench and meditates on the invisible layers within him that mirror hers. He considers how his own shadow, once a dark companion, now offers invitations to deeper self-knowledge. Each time he catches himself slipping into old narratives, seeking approval, fearing rejection, he greets the impulse with kindness, inviting it home into his conscious awareness, where it can no longer operate in the hidden corridors of his psyche. This practice, he realizes, extends the work of Layer 4, transforming projection into integration. In the hush of dusk, he attends to the murmurs of his anima, those intuitive whispers that once felt foreign, now guiding his creative hand. He sketches a design for a personal emblem, a circle enclosing 9 petals, each petal inscribed with a word that embodies one of the layers she first revealed: possession, detachment, poise, reflection, intuition, embodiment. boundaries, faith, mystery. He draws it slowly, tracing each line with reverence, watching as the emblem comes alive on the paper beneath his fingertips. That emblem becomes a talisman. He pins it above his desk and regards it each morning before the rush of tasks arrives. In this daily ritual, he honors Layer 6's archetypal dance, reminding himself that he is both wounded healer and sovereign creator, that his power both nurtures and protects. It stands as a silent discourse between his inner and outer worlds, guiding him when distractions threaten to scatter his focus. When he encounters setbacks, a proposal declined, a misunderstanding with a friend, he leans on Layer 8's inner faith like a steady pillar. He reminds himself that growth often hides within the crucible of failure, that the very obstacles he resists may carry him forward if he welcomes them. In this reframing, he experiences the Stoic alchemy. She modeled what he once perceived as threats, now reveal themselves as teachers. In solitude, he returns to the sanctuary of his unspoken dreams. He breathes life into Layer 9 by composing letters to future selves self, who has sown seeds of compassion into his community self, who has reclaimed joy after loss self, who stands fearless at the precipice of the unknown. He seals each letter in an envelope and tucks it into his emblem-laden box. Over time, the stack grows a testament to the evolving landscape of his inner life and the enduring mystery at its core. In the soft glow of candlelight, he meditates on the poetry of choice. He thinks of the moment when she first chose herself beyond the 9 layers, beyond any man's admiration or pursuit, and how that choice radiated outward like ripples in still water. He understands now that every subsequent choice, however small, carries that same generative power, the choice to honor his truth, to extend compassion, to embrace the mystery that defies words. He notices that his interactions no longer carry the undertow of desire masquerading as need. He offers kindness freely, not to elicit reciprocity, but because generosity reflects the shape of his transformed heart. He declines invitations that drain him not out of spite, but from devotion to his well-being. He stands in meetings without urgency to prove his worth, simply allowing his ideas to emerge in their own time. And in those moments he glimpses the paradox at the heart of silent power, that when you release the compulsion to perform, you perform at your fullest. When you relinquish the chase, you become worthy of the attention you once craved. When you hold your boundaries with kindness, you open a space where authentic connection can flourish. This paradox pulses within him now, animating every choice and breathing life into each breath. He feels the turn of the season as an invitation to new layers, yet unnamed layers he will discover by honoring the legacy of the 9 she revealed, and by charting his own path beyond them. He senses that his odyssey is not a race to a final summit, but a timeless dance in which every step, every moment, is both practice and culmination. In this evolving continuum, he carries her silent power, not as a shadow upon his mind, but as a guiding constellation within his soul, one that illuminates the way forward with gentle, unwavering light. In the soft hush before dawn, he feels the pulse of possibility stirring through his veins, a gentle reminder that growth is born in stillness as much as in action. He recalls Layer 1's decree of self-possession, that the truest sovereignty emerges when you claim your worth without fanfare. It was in her silent declaration of "I am whole" that he first understood power need not be broadcast. Now he carries that realization into the day ahead, stepping into each moment as both witness and participant. As sunlight filters through his window, he reflects on how detachment, the 2nd layer she taught, has become his ally rather than a distant ideal. He notices the ease with which he watches outcomes unfold, offering effort without attachment, like a gardener who plants seeds without forcing them to sprout. In this state, he feels the paradox of influence. The more he relinquishes control, the more his intentions take root in the world. In conversation with the loved one, he practices the poise of Layer 3. When an old trigger arises, the fear of not being enough, he pauses, naming it, and allowing it to pass like a cloud across the sky of his awareness. His calm presence becomes a balm to others, as if his inner stillness offers permission for them to find peace within themselves. He senses that these moments of quiet grace carry the weight of her example, that composure in adversity is a form of unspoken leadership. He encounters a situation that once would have rattled him a harsh critique from a mentor delivered without tact. In the past, such a blow would have sent him into spirals of self-doubt. But now, through Layer 4's reflection, he discerns the projection in the critique the mentor's own fear mirrored in his words. He thanks the mentor for the feedback, extracts what is useful, and lets the rest fall away untouched by his self-worth. In doing so, he honors the transformative power of shadow work she so masterfully wielded. Later, as he scribbles ideas for a new creative project, he leans into Layer 5's anima wisdom. He closes his eyes and breathes, trusting the intuitive current to guide his hand. The concept that emerges is both bold and intimate, a fusion of passion and purpose he never dared conceive before. He smiles at the sudden surge of clarity, acknowledging that the deepest insights arise when ego steps aside and the soul is invited to speak. That evening, he joins a gathering of peers. As laughter and debate intertwine, he practices Layer 6's archetypal embodiment. He engages the wounded healer within when a friend shares her pain, not with pity, but with compassionate understanding born of his own healed wounds. He summons the sovereign when asserting his boundaries about topics that drain him, and he radiates the free spirit when he allows spontaneous humor to light the room. His presence shifts the dynamic, a ripple effect sprung from the archetypal mastery she first illuminated. On his walk home, he ponders the art of boundaries, the seventh layer she carried like a shield of light. He recognizes moments from his past when he allowed others to overstep, mistaking acquiescence for kindness. Now he sets limits with gentle firmness, aware that true generosity arises when one's own reserve is honored. He greets each passerby with warmth, yet remains spacious within neither retreating nor collapsing. Under the canopy of stars, he reflects on Layer 8's inner faith. He remembers how she navigated uncertainty, trusting her inner compass even when the path was obscured. He feels that same trust humming through his own decisions to pursue a new career direction, to lean into vulnerability in friendship, to embrace risks that once felt too precarious. In each choice he senses the alignment of purpose and courage, knowing that faith is not blind but grounded in the accumulated evidence of self-trust. Before sleep claims him, he tends to the sanctuary of his unspoken dreams, the ninth layer's hidden cache. He journals the aspirations stirring in his heart to bring his art into the world, to build relationships rooted in authenticity, to live in harmony with his own values. He writes these dreams as affirmations of his emerging reality, sealing them in the wooden box that bears the emblem of 9 petals. In this sacred ritual, he honors the power of silence, trusting that some seeds germinate best in darkness. He senses that each of these practices, once borrowed from her example, has woven into the fiber of his being, becoming uniquely his own. The layers she revealed now resonate in concert, a living tapestry of self-possession, detachment, poise, reflection, intuition, embodiment, boundaries, faith, and mystery. They form the architecture of his inner world, a sanctuary that no external force can breach. In this unfolding journey, he realizes that the true measure of attraction is not in how others respond, but in how fully you inhabit your own depths. She consumed his mind not to capture it, but to awaken it, to show him that silent power lives in the spaces where authenticity meets courage. And as he embraces these layers within himself, he no longer sees her influence as an external shadow, but as the spark that ignited his own transformation. The morning sun now warms his face, and he stands at the threshold of a new chapter, one that he writes with each breath, each intention, each step. He no longer chases the echo of her presence. He carries its resonance in his own heartbeat. And in that resonance he finds the freedom to become the architect of his destiny, a sovereign soul alive with silent power of his own making. He awakens one morning to a profound stillness that feels neither empty nor idle, but pregnant with possibility. The restless hunger that once drove him to chase approval has fallen away like cast-off armor, revealing a heart unguarded, yet unafraid. In that quiet dawn, he senses the final stage of his own unfolding. Not a summit to be conquered, but a new horizon of self-trust where power no longer surges and ebbs but flows as steady as his own breath. He dresses with calm intention, selecting clothes not to impress another, but to honor the body that carries him through this life. Each garment feels like an extension of the sovereignty he has claimed, soft fabrics that move with him, rather than constrained colors that resonate with his inner light, rather than serve as a shield. In the mirror, he sees a face marked by lines of lived experience, laughter's creases, sorrow's shadows, wisdom's glow. He greets himself with a nod of recognition. This is the man she inspired him to become whole and unbowed. Stepping into the world, he carries the united force of all 9 layers, the rooted calm of self-possession, the open-hearted detachment that lets life unfold, the poised confidence that storms cannot shatter, the reflective courage that faces his own shadows, the intuitive wisdom that whispers beyond words, the archetypal fluidity that honors each facet of his being, the compassionate boundaries that protect his peace, the unwavering faith in his journey, and the reverent mystery of unspoken dreams. Together, these layers are no longer 9 separate currents, but a single river of power carrying him toward deeper waters. Along his path, he smiles at strangers, offering them the gift of presence without demand. They respond with genuine warmth, drawn not by any performance, but by the quiet magnetism of someone fully himself. He pauses to help a neighbor carry packages, speaks a kind word to a barista, listens when a friend confides without steering the conversation back to himself. These gestures, small yet radiant, ripple outward, transforming ordinary moments into exchanges of mutual respect. He sits for a moment beneath an old oak, its branches splayed like guardian arms overhead. In the dappled light, he reflects on the journey from obsession to freedom. Once he would have paced beneath this tree, imagining every possible way to capture her attention. Now he rests here in gratitude for the mirror she held up, not to ensnare him, but to reflect his own undiscovered depths. He breathes in and out, letting gratitude wash through him like a gentle tide. When the sky darkens and a soft rain begins, he welcomes it as nourishment for the earth and his own soul. He walks through the downpour without hurry, feeling each drop's cool kiss, not a disruption, but a blessing. In the rain's rhythm, he hears the echo of Stoic grace, that external storms need not disturb the calm at your center. He smiles because he knows in every storm he has weathered that his roots run deeper than any gale. Returning home, he lights a single candle and sits before it, honoring the flame's fragile glow. He closes his eyes and listens to the whisper of his heart, the same voice that once hesitated in the shadow of her silent strength, but now speaks with clear authority. He thanks himself for every moment of doubt and every act of courage, for together they have sculpted a soul both tender and strong. He reaches for his journal and writes a final line under the soft curve of the candlelight. I am both the sculptor and the clay, carving my destiny with each choice. The phrase feels true in his bones, an affirmation that the work of self-becoming is endless, yet boundless in its rewards. In the hush before sleep, he sends an unspoken blessing to her, an acknowledgement that her own journey continues beyond his sight, and that her silent power still ripples outward, inspiring others as it inspired him. He releases any lingering attachment to outcomes, trusting that the transformations begun in the mirror of her presence will continue to unfold in perfect time. And as his eyelids close, he rests in the hard-won peace of emotional freedom, where worth is self-decreed and validation is an inner flame. In this space, desire is no longer a hunger, but a curiosity, an invitation to explore new horizons of connection without losing the ground beneath his feet. The woman who knows her worth doesn't chase, she chooses.